Alright. Welcome to another Infinity Kingdom guide. In this one, we are going to have a look at skill mechanics. Some of you have been asking me both here in the YouTube comments, on Discord, and DMs, and in-game. What's the difference? I don't understand. What is a blessing? What's a passive? What's a trigger skill? What does auras do? And etc. So I decided to make a sort of a guide series explaining the different skill mechanics. You know, we're gonna take Tower of Knowledge passives and explain the different classes or types of skills. We're gonna go through blessings, auras, passives, trigger skills, and of course blessings and graces, which are kind of the same thing. Basically, Infinity Kingdom has a variety of different skills and passives, and all of these have unique effects and have different mechanics in the way that they interact in the combat scenarios. What this means is that skill mechanics, for instance, an aura type skill, that passive works different to a proc trigger ability passive, and entirely different too from how graces and blessings function. Moreover, damage procs can both occur and trigger in different ways. Some are some are damage over time effects, and they function in that way, like over a certain given time period, whereas others are bursty procs with instant damage upon triggering. Some trigger from hits, some trigger from time, some trigger from crits. All in all, there's a large variation in how skills and passives work in Infinity Kingdom. It's what makes the game complex, but it's also what makes this game such an awesome experience to play. You can synergize skills to great efficiency and effect, and if you understand a few fundamentals of how mechanics work, this however also leads to a bit confusion. Complexity drives confusion and depth, so there's good and bad in everything. But since there is a decent degree of complexity in the Infinity Kingdom skill system, this has given rise to a bunch of questions regarding how skills and passives functions and interact. And as such, I've promised these players to make a guide in which I will explain, or at least attempt to explain, the fundamental types of skills and passives and how the mechanics should be understood. I'm not going to be going into great detail with every single passive in the game. If you want more information on a particular passive, then let me know and I'll do a thorough passive review guide for that skill in particular. Instead, what we're going to do today is outline sort of the classes of passives, and that being classes of Tower of Knowledge skills, and explain how each work and how you can think about them in terms of synergizing with other passives and with other immortals. So Tower of Knowledge passives and immortal skill classes are, there are 4 different types, 4 different classes. We've got our trigger skills, stuff like combo, cleave, annihilation, chaotic blade, chase, energy burst, those kind of things. You've got blessings and graces. These are the same. They used to be called blessings. Now I think most, if not all, have been changed to graces, but it's the same thing. We've got blessing of rage, blessing of war, blessing of defense. We've got Oaken Guard, resist, energy suppression, those kind of things. For auras, you've got berserk, you've got coercion, malice, weakness, shelter, paralysis, sacrifice, all these skills. And for passives, straight passives, we've got stuff like Dual Master, anger, rage, concentration, those kind of things. Right, so let's begin with triggered skills. There's a lot of skills and passives which are triggered. Being triggered means that a certain condition has to occur, be met, in order for the skill effect to be triggered. In Infinity Kingdom, just before we dive into it, some skills are marked as passives and others as triggered, despite the fact they are in fact both trigger skills. There are a few Tower Knowledge skills which should be renamed. Things like combo, it doesn't function as a passive in the rest of the category. Instead, it has a chance to trigger damage, so it should be called a triggered skill, at least in my opinion. And you should be thinking of it as a triggered skill, because synergizing that requires attack speed, something like that, more than what usual passives do. So think about all of these. If it has a chance to do something, if it has a requirement, if it has a trigger, well, then it's a trigger skill. So disregard the in-game text, it'll only confuse you. Think of all skills that has a trigger as trigger skills. For example, using a skill like combo, it reads that when triggered, your immortal inflicts a certain percent damage on the enemy being attacked, and it's also indicated that the trigger condition is normal attacks. As such, your immortal has combo on, there's a chance to trigger the physical damage every time the immortal performs a normal attack. On other skills like Chaotic Blade, or could also be one of the magic dot effects, Toxic Nova or Fire Nova, we don't have the same kind of trigger as we did on combo. Combo had a normal attack trigger. Instead, we've got a time trigger here. Every 6 seconds after the battle has started, there's a 40% chance. So things like attack speed, things like that, doesn't work on these skills. You can't synergize it to get more procs in that way. Instead, you are just gonna have to wait for 6 seconds and hope that it does land. Basically, there's a few different triggered skills in Infinity Kingdom, but they all function in the same way. The fundamentals are all the same. They've got a trigger condition, something that has to be met in order for the skill to take effect, and they have a skill effect, which is what happens once the trigger is met. They do differ greatly in terms of trigger condition and skill effect, but they all function in the same kind of way. These are some of the trigger skills, and I'm not going to go into more depth with it. If you want to learn more about some more of these triggered skills, how precisely it works, but also how you can use these skills with synergies to other immortals and other skills, then check out my standalone guide. I'm going to be releasing this as an overview guide and a standalone guide for all the different skill types or skill classes. Anyway, moving on to Blessings and Graces. Blessings and Graces are skills which function by providing a combat buff in a certain amount of time for your mortals in your march. This buff is not permanent like the auras are. Instead, it's a temporal buff. They last for varying amounts of time and provides buffs to your mortals while active. Blessing War, for instance, provides an increase in all damage done by your troops by 25% for 12 seconds. Skill like Energy Suppression, that's sort of the other way of the equation. It slows the energy speed of all enemy troops by 50% for the first 12 seconds of the fight. Then you've got skills like Open Guard and Resist, which I believe have an 18-second timer on, making slight differences, but again the fundamentals are the same. Once the buff timer runs out, then these skills will no longer provide any value for the remainder of the fight. Blessings and Graces are always applied at the beginning of a fight. That means that for the first X seconds of a fight, for the first 12 seconds, for the first 18 seconds of a fight, depending on which Graces, Blessings you are running, your immortals are going to have all the buffs active at once. And once the timer runs out on them, or they are dispelled, because be aware they can't be dispelled, it no longer provides any value. It's a temporal buff. Basically, we've got the blessings, we've got Oaken Guard, energy suppression, and resist, as well as after image as our blessings and graces. To learn more about these and how to synergize them well with immortals and each other, again, check out the standalone guide. It's going to be published soon on graces. Moving on to auras. This leads nicely, graces and blessings lead nicely into aura skills, because they do function in kind of in the same way. These skills are skills that provide, or passives that provide combat buffs and debuffs passively to your immortals. That means that there's not a trigger, there's not anything. It's like graces, they just work, they just provide a buff for whatever you're doing, or provide a debuff for your enemy. However, they are limited in use. These auras are all quite powerful skills, and as such they are limited. You can only equip one aura for each immortal. That's simply because otherwise running a support immortal with 3 auras would make said support a bit too strong, and that would skew the meta away from running, for instance, utility instead of support, or running straight damage. Anyway, as a class of skills, there's really not much to say about auras besides the fact that you can equip only one per immortal, and that auras passively provide a unique effect throughout the entire fight. You're thinking of blessings and graces as we had before. We had a buff, a temporal buff, provided set effect for a certain time. Well, with an aura, there's just no timer on, and it cannot be dispelled. That means that Malice, for instance, reduces the crit rate of all your enemy units by 20%, and that's going to carry on throughout the entire fight, no matter what happens. Shelter protects your friendly immortals, your own immortals, giving them a chance to restore HP. This can be countered by wounds, of course, but the effect, the buff itself, cannot be dispelled and isn't removed at all either. This goes for all auras, all aura effects. They are permanent and they are undispellable. Now, you can of course also check out my standalone guide on auras. For auras, I'm doing mostly synergy, meaning what kind of aura should you be running for what kind of build compositions. When is one good, when is one not good. So check out my standalone guide on auras for that. And lastly, we've got the passives type, the passive class of skills. These are quite simple. Being a passive means that their effects are permanent and that they are applied at all times as long as the passive is equipped. They need no trigger, they have no duration, and they cannot be dispelled. Sounds like an aura, right? Well, it kind of is, but it only works on one immortal. So only the immortal you got equipped with, let's say, Rage. You're equipping Rage on Empress Wu because you want to get some crits in there. Well, Empress Wu's crit rate is increased by 15% from the beginning of the fight to the end of the fight. Cannot be dispelled, cannot be removed, doesn't affect anyone else but Empress Wu. That's basically all there is to passives, or at least how they function. What is going, that's the basics of what passives are. There are many different kinds of passives, however. We've got sort of the simple ones like Anchor and Concentration, providing flat boosts, Rage as well. And then we've got some very interesting utility passives like Dual Master, Fighting Master, which should be used with thought, because they are hard counters to some of the strongest mechanics in the game. That's what I'm going to be focusing on for the standalone guide on passives, as well as a bit more info on every single passive and how they work, how they synergize with other kinds of immortals, as well as other skills, because many of these passives are the core synergy, or well, sort of improve the base and are synergizing quite well with especially the trigger passives, the trigger skills we had up front. Anyway, that is the video on sort of the overview of all of the different skill type mechanics. This was sort of a brief introduction for those who just need to know what the heck I'm on about. If you need additional info, like I said, there are going to be released 4 standalone guides on each class type of skill. So check those out. I hope to get 2 out this week, and the rest gonna come after the holidays. Merry Christmas, and thank you for watching. As always, please do subscribe to the channel. I consistently release new content here on the IK channel and on the official IK Wiki website. Links are in the description. On these channels you can find guides from everything in IK, from events to talents, passives, finished builds and game mechanics. With that, I'm gonna leave you, and as always, thank you for watching and see you for the next one.